Monday, July 31st, 2023. Welcome to the All About Your Benjamins Week in Review video for the RLS Wealth Rundown. That has become a mouthful now. Hope you had a great weekend. Before I get started, I wanted to just send a quick happy birthday to Roman. I don't know if he ever is going to check on a rundown video, but wanted to wish him a happy birthday today. So hope you have a great day, and I wrote a daily note for you, son, so go check that out on my daily notes. All right, this is take two. I recorded this yesterday on Sunday, actually. Got up this morning to do my morning routine, edit this video up, and then realized I did not have the microphone plugged all the way into the camera properly, so you could barely hear the audio. So we're gonna go with the second take. That's why this is coming out a little bit later, because I had to re-record this and then edit it to get it into the rundown. So with that, let's get to the headlines that may or may not be impacting your financial plan and portfolio. And if you are checking this out on All About Your Benjamins, you click the link, you can see there's a handful of articles down below. But the bulk of it is around, a couple of things: the Fed and inflation. So we'll start there, and then we'll end with some kind of fun news at the very end. But first and foremost, the Federal Reserve met last week. They raised interest rates another quarter point after taking a pause back in June. So rates are at the highest they've been in 22 years. And we'd love to have, I don't, but the media loves to make headlines with highest in a certain amount of time and in 22 years. But for so long, interest rates were very, very low. So to be at the highest in 22 years, while it is a milestone of sorts, when rates were so low for so long, that's not saying that much. But nonetheless, they raised it a quarter point. Last month, they said they were happy with where inflation was coming down. They could see that it was coming down, but often you also left themselves open to being able to raise rates more in the future. And so this month they did. Again, commentary coming out is they're happy, they're seeing inflation coming down. But if you remember, when they first started to raise rates, they were talking about employment, they were talking about wages, they were talking about price increases. Well, the cost of goods is coming down. Supply chain may be a part of that. Now that supply chain's back on where it's supposed to be, and we're able to get the chips and the wood and all the things that we were waiting on that were sitting out ports a couple years ago. Supply chain issues are being fixed. Prices are coming down. They're not growing as quickly. So they're seeing that happen, but they're looking at these metrics of the employment picture. Jobs report are still continuing to be pretty strong. Wages are still growing. So that part isn't matching. There was a point where Chairman Powell even basically said he was looking for a recession to signal that inflation was going to be under control. And with inflation, if that meant people lost jobs, then he was prepared to do so. So we've got this kind of a conflict here of inflation coming down, but those other metrics they were looking for not changing. So it'll be interesting to see when they finally realize, okay, inflation's coming down. We did the magical. We had a soft landing. That's one of the articles that you see. So a soft landing basically is slowing down the economy, slowing down inflation without causing a major recession. The thought was, we're going to force us into a bad recession to bring inflation down. We'll take our medicine. That pain will hurt, but then we'll be better going forward. And they've always talked about the potential for a soft landing, but I don't think anybody really thought they were going to be able to do that. And we'll have to wait and see if we finally do have that soft landing. One thing just to be kind of aware of is that recessions happen regularly. So whether or not we get a recession now, this is the most sought after recession, not necessarily sought after that we want it, but expected recession in history. And while going back, there was a period of time where we had back-to-back GDP non-growth for two quarters, which is technically the definition of a recession. Kind of changed that a little bit for today's terms. But let's just say we didn't have a real recession. We are one day closer every single day to a recession since they normally happen. So whether or not the next recession we experience is the direct result of the rates going up, or if it's something else, when we have these predictions of recession coming, no one knows when that might be. But to make a prediction that a recession is coming is not it's not a hard prediction to make, because we're always closer to a recession unless we're in one. So nonetheless, a recession will come one day. Whether it will be in 2024 or beyond, we'll have to wait and see. But it doesn't look like the interest rates being increased so quickly by the Federal Reserve is going to throw us into the recession that so many feared, which ultimately is a good thing. But nonetheless, we'll have to wait and see. So rates went up. The next day, we get a report saying that GDP growth continued to grow. So GDP growth grew at 2.4%, and that means the economy is still growing at a pretty good rate. So again, rates going up was supposed to slow down the economy, but the economy is not really slowing down. And no one really knows why. There's lots of reasons out there to think. One of the areas that was expected to really slow down, which would have slowed the economy down, is housing. But depending on where you are, because housing is a little bit of regional, or where you are, real estate depends on the local markets. Overall, housing prices aren't really coming down. I'm sure there's some areas that are seeing some prices come down, but for the most part, prices are holding, if not still going up. I'm still hearing of people selling their houses and getting over asking price within a few days. So housing is holding up despite mortgages being at 7%, and everybody thought that with mortgage rates up that high, housing would slow down. But I think part of it is the problem of there's not enough inventory out there. And then I have to give credit to my friend Josh Brown. He made a great comment, I think it was a great comment, on his podcast on Friday that said he thought one of the reasons that housing was holding up is so many of us are sitting on a decent amount of equity. So that plays out in a couple of ways. We don't have to move. And we have equity in our house. And when you have equity in your house, a lot of times psychology says people feel good about their situation when their house has good value and they have equity in it. Another reason it helps out is, well, even though interest rates are up, if you're moving houses and you have a decent amount of equity in your house that's appreciated, you take that equity, you roll it into the next house, and despite the higher interest rate, your payment may not be as high as it would have been if your house hadn't appreciated as much. So a lot of people, they pay attention to the price of the house, but they buy the house based on the payment. So if you have more equity to roll into the next house that you're upgrading to, then your payment may not be as bad as it would have been with less equity, and you can still afford to do so. But housing is the one that I think a lot of people are still scratching their heads on why is housing still holding up if interest rates are so high. So that'll be something we continue to watch. If I had a crystal ball, which I don't, my guess is I don't know if we see a plummet in housing prices like we saw back in 07, 08, 09, and that time. Different reasons, but maybe we do see things cool off and slow at some point. But maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so those are the main economic things I wanted to hit on. The final thing I thought I'd end with some fun is that this week, or I guess this past week, there was a congressional hearing where a former military announced that the U.S. government has not only UFOs in housing somewhere, but also non-human bodies that were discovered in those. So there's this story about aliens and the U.S. having them, and that was kind of an interesting story. Some people were out there saying, what are they distracting us from with that story, which I think is an interesting approach. And it does kind of seem like sometimes we have these stories that come out of nowhere to get us to look over there when something else is going on over here. I don't know what that might be. I don't want to go through life thinking that we're always getting the wool pulled over our eyes, but nonetheless, I do sometimes wonder why these stories come up. But I thought it was interesting. Space and aliens and UFOs has always been something we as Americans have been interested in, movies and all those things. So to be told by a high-ranking former military official that there is evidence of UFOs and non-human life here in the U.S. was very interesting. So I thought I would end with that. All right, well, hopefully when I hit this done, it looks like the audio is working right. We've got this, so I have this rundown video for you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be doing these a little bit more sporadically instead of doing every week. If there's something major to cover, I'm not going to take your time and have you go off to YouTube to watch a video, but if there are major things like the Fed and GDP and all these things that kind of come together, or maybe it's just been long enough, there's been enough minor pieces together to kind of put it all together for you, we'll do these. So the videos will still be here, be coming back. School's getting ready to start next week, so routines get back a little bit to normal, but I'm not going to do these every week if there's nothing really to cover, because that just wastes your time, and I'd rather spend that time doing something else. So happy to do these. I love doing these actually, but I'm only going to do them when there's something worthwhile of taking your time. So with that, have a great day, and we'll see you all in the next episode.